Think about something you want. Not a vague aspiration, but something specific. A promotion you have been working toward, a relationship you would like to be in, a sum of money that would solve a particular problem, a place you would like to live, an achievement whose attainment would, you feel fairly certain, make your life substantially better than it currently is. Now think about how confident you are in that prediction. How certain you are that getting the thing will produce the emotional state you are anticipating, that the promotion will bring the satisfaction you imagine, that the relationship will generate the happiness you expect, that the money or the place or the achievement will deliver on what it has promised you it will deliver. The research suggests your confidence is probably not justified, not because you are unusually bad at knowing what you want, but because human beings in general are systematically, predictably, and consistently wrong about what will make them happy. The gap between what people predict they will feel when they get what they want and what they actually feel when they get it is one of the most robust findings in psychology. And understanding why it exists and what it reveals about the nature of the human mind is one of the most practically important things you can do with your time. The psychologist who has done more than anyone else to document and explain this gap is Daniel Gilbert, a professor at Harvard University. In his 2006 book, Stumbling on Happiness, and in the research that preceded and followed it, Gilbert laid out what he calls affective forecasting, the process by which human beings predict their future emotional states, and documented the systematic ways in which this process goes wrong. The central finding is this: when people try to imagine how they will feel about a future event, they make predictable and consistent errors. They overestimate how intensely they will feel good when good things happen, and how intensely they will feel bad when bad things happen. And they overestimate how long these feelings will last. Gilbert calls this the impact bias, the tendency to overestimate the hedonic impact of future events, and it applies to both positive and negative events with remarkable symmetry. People predict that getting a promotion will make them substantially happier than it actually does. They predict that losing a job will make them substantially more miserable than it actually does. They predict that ending a relationship will devastate them more than it actually does. They predict that getting into their first-choice college will make them happier than their second-choice college, and they are wrong about this too. The impact bias has been documented across an extraordinary range of life events and life circumstances, across cultures, across socioeconomic groups, across different personality types. It is not a feature of some people, it is a feature of people. Why does it happen? Gilbert identifies several mechanisms that together produce the impact bias. The first and perhaps most fundamental is what he calls focalism. When you imagine how you will feel about a future event, you focus on that event in isolation. You imagine the promotion, or the relationship, or the achievement, without imagining the context in which it will occur. But future emotional states do not occur in isolation. They occur in the context of an ongoing life, full of other things. The promotion arrives, but so does the difficult colleague who now reports to you, and the increased responsibility that makes the weekends feel different, and all the ordinary concerns and pleasures of daily life that continue to exist regardless of whether you have been promoted. The focusing illusion, as the psychologist Daniel Kahneman later named it, captures this mechanism perfectly. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it. When you are thinking about the promotion, it fills your field of cognitive attention. When you actually have the promotion, it is one element of a life full of other elements, and its emotional weight is diluted by everything else that is simultaneously happening. The second mechanism is what Gilbert calls the impact of psychological immune system processes. When bad things happen, human beings are far more effective than they expect at adapting to them. The psychological immune system is the collection of cognitive mechanisms through which people unconsciously process and reframe negative experiences in ways that reduce their emotional impact. Rationalization, reframing, finding silver linings, adjusting expectations, making meaning. These processes are activated automatically when things go wrong, and they are remarkably effective at reducing suffering. The problem is that they operate largely below the level of conscious awareness. People do not know their psychological immune system is working because it is working in the background. So when they forecast how they will feel about a bad outcome, they do not factor in the existence of this system. They imagine themselves feeling as bad as the raw event would suggest, without accounting for the cushioning that their own cognitive processes will automatically provide. Gilbert and his colleagues have demonstrated this in a striking series of experiments. Participants who were photographed and then told their photographs would be publicly displayed were asked to predict how they would feel about having an unflattering photograph on public view. People who were given the opportunity to change their photograph afterwards were significantly less happy with their experience than people who were told they could not change it. The inability to change the photograph forced them to make peace with it in a way that the option to change it did not. Psychological adaptation requires the foreclosure of alternatives. This finding has profound implications for how people make choices. Gilbert argues that people systematically prefer reversible choices over irreversible ones, believing that having the option to change their mind will make them happier. But the research suggests the opposite is often true. Reversible choices keep open the psychological process of continued evaluation and comparison, which prevents adaptation. Irreversible choices force adaptation, which produces genuine contentment. The third mechanism involves what Gilbert calls the misuse of comparison sets. When people predict how they will feel about a future event, they typically compare that future state to their current state. But when they actually arrive in the future state, they compare it to the other possible future states that they could have been in instead. The person who got the promotion does not continue comparing themselves to their pre-promotion self. They begin comparing themselves to the colleague who got a bigger promotion, or to the friend who has a more interesting job, or to some imagined version of the career they might have had. The comparison changes, and because it changes, the emotional impact is different from what was predicted. The fourth mechanism is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. Over time, almost any stable change in circumstances, positive or negative, loses its emotional power. The new house stops feeling new. The new relationship loses the quality of novelty that made it so emotionally vivid. The new salary becomes the baseline against which further changes are measured, rather than a source of ongoing satisfaction. This process of adaptation is extremely well documented and remarkably consistent. People adapt to almost everything, faster than they expect, and more completely than they expect. Hedonic adaptation is the reason that lottery winners, on average, report levels of happiness that are not significantly higher than non-winners at 1 year after winning. It is the reason that people who become paraplegic report levels of happiness that are not significantly lower than non-injured people at 1 year after injury. These findings, first documented by Brickman, Coates, and Janoff-Bulman in their landmark 1978 study, were initially met with considerable skepticism because they seemed so counterintuitive. But they have been replicated and extended many times, and the basic finding is robust. Gilbert also documents what he calls the immune neglect problem, which is closely related to the impact bias but distinct from it. When people imagine future negative events, they fail to appreciate not just the general human capacity for adaptation, but their own specific capacity for finding meaning, making sense, and constructing positive interpretations of negative experiences. In other words, they underestimate not just that people in general recover from bad things, but that they specifically, with their specific values and cognitive styles and social resources, will recover from the specific bad things they are imagining. Understanding the impact bias and the mechanisms that produce it has specific and actionable implications. The most important implication concerns the value of what Gilbert calls surrogation. If your own predictions about how you will feel are systematically unreliable, then other people's actual reports about how they feel in situations you are imagining might be more informative than your own predictions. The person who already has the thing you want is a better guide to how you will feel when you get it than your own imagination is. And yet people consistently resist this information. They believe their own case is special, that their experience of the new house or the promotion or the relationship will be different from other people's experiences, that they will be the exception to the adaptation that everyone else undergoes. The research suggests this belief is almost always wrong. The second implication concerns what Gilbert calls the distinction between natural happiness and synthetic happiness. Natural happiness is what you feel when you get what you want. Synthetic happiness is what you feel when you make the best of what you have. Most people believe that natural happiness is superior, that getting what you want is genuinely better than making peace with what you have. But Gilbert's research suggests that synthetic happiness, the contentment produced by successful adaptation, is not in any measurable sense inferior to natural happiness. It feels just as good, it lasts just as long, and it is, paradoxically, more under a person's control than natural happiness, which depends on external circumstances behaving as predicted. The third implication concerns the question of what actually does predict well-being if the things people typically predict will make them happy often fail to do so. The research on this question converges on several findings that are consistently counterintuitive. Social connection is the single most robust predictor of subjective well-being across cultures, ages, and life circumstances. Not the quantity of social interactions, but the quality. Deep relationships, felt sense of belonging, regular meaningful contact with people who know you well. These are more predictive of happiness than income, achievement, status, or material circumstances beyond a basic threshold of comfort and security. Autonomy, the sense that your life is governed by your own choices rather than by external constraints, is a strong predictor of well-being. This is related to, but distinct from, wealth or achievement. What matters is not how much freedom you actually have, but how much agency you feel. Engagement, the sense of being absorbed in meaningful activity, predicts well-being more reliably than the content of that activity. The state that Csikszentmihalyi called flow, as we have explored in a previous video, is associated with high well-being regardless of the specific domain in which it occurs. And purpose, the sense that one's life is organized around something larger than immediate personal satisfaction, predicts well-being in ways that pleasure alone does not. The distinction between a pleasant life and a meaningful life is not simply that meaningful lives involve more suffering. It is that they involve a different relationship to experience, one in which even difficult experiences can be integrated into a larger narrative that makes them bearable and sometimes even valuable. The fourth implication is perhaps the most unsettling. If people are systematically wrong about what will make them happy, and if the things they most confidently expect to generate happiness often fail to do so, then a significant portion of the effort and sacrifice that people invest in pursuing what they want is effort and sacrifice that produces less happiness than predicted. The person who works 80-hour weeks for a decade to achieve a professional status that produces less satisfaction than anticipated. The person who delays intimacy and connection in pursuit of achievements that prove to be adaptive. The person who organizes their life around the attainment of a future state that turns out to feel more or less like the present state once the adaptation has occurred. This is not an argument for passivity or for the abandonment of ambition. It is an argument for directing ambition at the things that the evidence suggests actually produce durable well-being: social connection, autonomy, engagement, purpose, and for holding the specific objects of desire, the promotion, the house, the relationship, the achievement, with slightly less certainty that they will deliver what they have promised. Daniel Kahneman, who shared the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002 for his work on judgment and decision-making, makes a distinction that is useful here. He distinguishes between the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self is the one that lives through events in real time. The remembering self is the one that evaluates those events retrospectively and constructs the narrative of what happened and how it felt. Kahneman's research shows that the remembering self makes systematic errors in evaluating past experience, focusing disproportionately on the peak emotional moments and the ending, and ignoring the duration of the experience. When you remember a vacation, you remember the best moment and how it ended, not the average of all the moments within it. This means that the memories that guide your future choices are themselves biased representations of the experiences that produce them. You are making decisions about what to pursue based on memories that overrepresent intensity and underrepresent duration. And those decisions are guided by predictions that overestimate impact and underestimate adaptation. The machinery through which you navigate toward what you want is, at multiple levels, unreliable. Not hopelessly so, not in ways that cannot be partially corrected by understanding them, but unreliable enough that the confidence most people feel in their predictions about what will make them happy is substantially more confidence than the evidence warrants. You have probably been wrong about what would make you happy before. The thing you were certain would change everything, that arrived and was absorbed by the ordinary ongoing texture of your life faster than you expected. The thing you were certain would be catastrophic, that turned out to be survivable, and sometimes more than survivable. You will probably be wrong again. The question is not whether to want things. It is whether to hold those wants with the kind of certainty that causes you to sacrifice too much of the present for a future that may not feel the way you currently predict it will. That is a question worth taking seriously. The evidence suggests most people never do.